Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish and I am here to talk with you today about needlework. Usually it's mostly about cross stitch. Today I'll be a little bit about needlepoint as well. But first I want to wish you a happy new year, and I hope it's going to be a year full of blessings, good fortune, and good health. My year is off to a good start. I am looking forward to my trip, which I'll be leaving home towards the end of next week. And I mentioned last episode that we're going to be stopping at the Inspired Needle. When I say we, my friend Mendy and I are going to be taking a road trip after the cruise that we're on together, the FlossTube at Sea cruise. What I didn't mention is that I'll be at the cross stitch cupboard with all the folks from the cruise before the cruise leaves. But that Friday on the 12th, I will be at the cupboard just kind of hanging out, and I know that I'll be there between 2 and 4. So if you're in town and you've got time, I'd love for you to come by and say hey. And also, Stitchin Kitten will be one of my stops on my way back home after everything else. Be one of my last stops on my way home, and that will be on, I didn't write the date down, it's the Friday, I better go look that up. Hold on a second. When you use your phone as your camera to make these episodes, you don't have your phone handy just to look up a date, but it's Friday, January 26th, and I'll be at the Stitchin Kitten in Irmo, South Carolina, and I'll put the details in the episode description. So if you're hanging around the Columbia, South Carolina area that weekend, come by and say hey. The big news for me and my Stitchers Escapes crew is that we announced our 2025 cruises a couple days ago, and all the information is on our website now. The way our website is set up, when you open it, you see the two most current cruises, which of course are both sold out. So if you go up to the event tab and click on that, then the drop down menu will show you 2025 FlossTube at Sea and 2025 Alaska. So we're really excited about this, and I'll put the links in the episode description. So FlossTube at Sea will once again leave Fort Lauderdale and sail the Caribbean. Same sort of format, 7 days, 3 FlossTube personalities that will be presenting projects. I'll be one. The other two will be announced pretty soon. So just really excited about that. And of course, next week, starting on the 14th of this month, our FlossTube at Sea 2024 will begin. And so we'll have lots of pictures, and I hope that there'll be lots of people posting about the good time that they're having. So we're going back to Alaska. Now, we did Alaska in 2019. Is that right? Yeah, 2019. And had a fabulous time. And no sooner did we get off the ship than everybody was saying, when can we do this again? So we're coming back, and we'll be leaving from Vancouver, British Columbia this time. And that sail date is September 7th, again, 2025. Now, registration for both of these cruises will open pretty soon, and I'll have that information in the episode description. Now, the Alaska cruise, we're really excited about all of them, but Alaska, Tony Gerdes is coming back with us again. Tony taught on the other Alaska cruise that we did, and she's a fabulous needlepoint teacher. And so if you are a needlepointer or you're a cross stitcher and you've been thinking about giving it a try, that'll be a good opportunity. And wait for it, Karen and Bren from Fox and Rabbit are coming from Australia to cruise with us, and we'll be presenting projects. So just lots of talent on that cruise, and of course fantastic scenery, again, good food, good accommodations, beautiful ship, and we just can't wait. Now, I was in Vancouver last year for the first time. Year before last. Man, time really flies. And I found it to just be a delightful city, very walkable, great restaurants, and looking forward to going back. So I hope you'll be able to join us on one of those cruises. Now, the regular cruise, well, I call them a regular cruise. FlossTube at Sea is a very different format. The Alaska cruise, there will be classes, and there'll be group excursions, but there will not be the sort of setting that you may be used to in a land-based retreat. FlossTube at Sea is like that. FlossTube at Sea, we're going to come in, the conference room will be set up, and everybody can just sit and stitch all day long if they want to. The Alaska cruise, we'll use the conference center for classes of 20 to 25 at a time, and it'll just be a very different setup. So just want to make that distinction. So last week I talked a lot about the tent stitch, the family of tent stitches, half cross, continental, and basket weave. And I made the comment, rather naively, that I didn't really get why cross stitchers were so enamored with continental and basket weave when the half cross will work just fine. Back in my mind, I was thinking, I'm forgetting something, and Needlebug reminded me, and this was her comment. As a full coverage stitcher, I think a lot of the stitchers are using continental tent in order to avoid the floss slipping under the fabric threads when using half cross. This is mostly used if they are stitching over 1 on finer counts. The slippage occurs in those stitches where the thread travel on the back goes opposite the direction of the top thread to intersect their stitching. And aha, a big light bulb went on in my head, of course, and I should have thought of this. So I do have a pretty good tutorial on stitching over 1 as cross stitch. And yes, if you're not careful, not with the slant of the stitch, but the direction that you're stitching in relative to which linen thread is facing you, whether it's horizontal or vertical, then yes, your stitches can slip beneath the intersection. Now, I hear all kinds of workarounds that people talk about. One of them was, if your stitch slips, then just do it again. And, that's not really a good solution. So I'll also put a note in the episode description linking you back to the FlossTube tutorial of stitching cross stitch over 1. So thinking about that, then yes, the continental and basket weave are going to work best for stitching over 1 on linen. You're not going to lose your stitches behind an intersection. So a couple people also commented and asked me to go ahead and demonstrate it on canvas, which I'm going to do in just a moment. So let me just say that canvas is woven in the same manner that even weave fabrics for cross stitch and linen fabrics for cross stitch are woven. To a weaver, it's called a tabby weave. It's just each, as you're weaving across, you've got your threads going this way, and the thread going across goes over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, all the way across and back in the opposite fashion. And that is plain weave. That's just a regular weave. And so both your needlepoint canvas and your linen and even weave are all done in the same way. What makes needlepoint canvas is that in addition to the fact that it's made with 100% cotton, it is heavily, I'm not going to use the word starch. There's a stiffener that's applied to it that gives it body. And that that helps keep those intersections snug, and needle pointers don't worry about the slippage thing. So, what I'm going to demonstrate on needlepoint canvas, the same principles apply to doing basket weave on linen. Same thing. Okay, let me get set up. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about here is lighting. It's important that your lighting is coming slightly from the side. If your lighting is straight from the top, it will not cast any shadows. And the shadows are what allows you to distinguish the weave of the fabric, whether the top thread is horizontal or vertical. And that is absolutely key in being able to successfully do basket weave. Okay, so here's a little sample that I started. And remember, when you're working basket weave, you don't work on rows going back and forth or columns going up and down. Instead, you're always working on the diagonal. Couple of really important things with basket weave. First of all, you have to be able to see the weave, whether it's canvas or linen, it doesn't matter. So make sure that your lighting is good enough that you can see well, but also your lighting has to be such that you are seeing the shadows cast. For example, when I hold my canvas like that, you can very clearly see which of the threads are horizontal on the top and which ones are vertical on the top. So if you are looking at it in such a way that you're saying, oh my gosh, I can't tell which thread is on the top, try adjusting your lighting or holding your canvas or your fabric in such a way that you can see it. Okay, so when I look at this, I know that my next journey is going to be going from top to bottom. Even if I had buried ended my thread and wasn't sure, I know that because my next set of stitches on the diagonal are these poles. So this is where my next stitch will go. And again, as I said last time on basket weave, every stitch is slanted the same and every one is going from bottom to top. What I didn't show you was that if you stitch in hand, it actually becomes easier. So let me show you what I mean by that. Anytime you're stitching in hand, you're finishing a stitch, you're putting your needle where your stitch ends and coming back out where your next stitch will begin. So this is the next stitch I need to cover. So I'm going to end here and begin here. So I'm going to put my needle here to here. The thing that is important, or the thing that helped me, this is how I learned to do basket weave in the 70s, was notice that since I'm covering stitches that are vertical, my needle is vertical. So as I'm going down this journey of poles, my needle is actually mimicking the same direction as the top thread in my needlepoint canvas. And the same would be true if you're working with linen. So I'm just going to work down this journey. Now, needlepoint canvas will soften up as you're working it, and so it actually becomes easier when you're doing a project. Now, I never mastered sewing to end a journey and begin the next. So this is my last stitch in this journey. And my next stitch is, again, since they were poles, my next one's going to be steps. And if I wasn't sure, when I look at this, I can see that the next set of stitches, the top thread is going this way. So I'm going to finish the stitch here, and my next stitch will begin here. So notice now my needle is sideways. I'm going up the steps. The steps are horizontal, and my needle is horizontal. That really will help you remember which way to go. Now, let me be clear, you don't have to sew when you're doing basket weave. You can poke and pull. Oops, I got caught on the corner there. And by the way, in case you're wondering, I am stitching, this is a 13 count canvas, and I'm stitching with silk and ivory, which is a 50-50 silk and wool thread. So again, I'm going to finish that journey and put my needle where the next one begins. And again, you can see that that next set of journey, they're all poles. So now my needle is going to mimic that same direction of the poles. Oh. Sorry, this is a problem when you're demonstrating on a small canvas. The thread keeps getting caught in the rough edges. Now let's take a look at the back. You'll notice that when I was changed to a sewing motion, it very much looks much more like a basket weave than the first stitches. But that's how the stitch gets its name, is because it actually looks like a weave. Now, one other important thing that I will share with you, and then I'm going to leave this topic. When you are ready to end a thread, since this row is going down, I want to end my thread in that same direction. And I use what I call it's sort of a mock waist knot. I want to hold this thread in such a way that my next stitches are going to cover it. So on the back, you can see that my ending thread is running parallel to my canvas threads. If I were going up a row, my ending thread would go sideways. You never, ever, ever do basket weave ending your thread by burring it under existing stitches on the diagonal. You're much, much better off burring it with your next stitches. So what I do is, to anchor this, is I just take a couple little stitches like this. If I were stitching on linen that was more open, I might go back and pierce my thread and then come back like this and then cut that off just so it won't be in the way. And that's enough just to hold that in place, so that as I continue stitching and go back and forth, after I've covered it by about 1/2 inch, then I would feel like that was buried well enough, and I would cut off the excess. And I began my stitches in the same way. When I started this row, I had a buried waist knot over here, and I carried my thread over here. I started stitching, and once I had enough done that that beginning thread was secure, I cut it off. Anyway, so that's basic Basket Weave 101, and everything that I just said applies to linen as well, because linen is manufactured in with the same weave as needlepoint canvas. So I hope that helps. If stitches were people, the stitch that I would feel sorry for is the backstitch. Backstitches are misunderstood, they're mistreated, they're mislabeled, and generally subjected to a whole lot of hate mail. People just say mean things about backstitch all the time. And I have to wonder if part of that's because they just don't know how to do it. So I look back to see, I knew I had an episode, one of my early episodes about backstitch, I couldn't remember which one. So I looked it up. It was episode 19. So I'm going to put the link to that in the episode description for today's episode, not to be confusing. So that if you are struggling with it or you know someone who is, you might want to take a look. In that episode, I not only showed how to do basket weave, but also talked about the other stitches that are very often confused. Did I just say basket weave? I think I did. When I go back to edit this, if I said basket weave instead of backstitch, please forgive me. I probably won't be able to fix it. So let me just go forward. I'm talking about backstitch now. Okay, so so I talked about the other stitches that are very often confused with backstitch, the stem stitch, the outline stitch, to try to, again, educate people to, at least use the right term. But here's my advice. If you watch what I think is a pretty good tutorial and you still don't get it and you still don't like it, then just choose charts that don't have backstitch in them. I mean, it's pretty simple. There are plenty of, my gosh, there are so many more charts available now than there ever were when I first started in the 80s. So pick something that doesn't have backstitch in it. The other thing, too, I have to wonder is when people, very often when people teach cross-stitch, and even in written directions, it will say something to the effect of, don't do the backstitch till all the cross-stitch is done. And see, that's misleading. Backstitch generally, if backstitch is done at this, how do I want to say that? Sometimes backstitch is all by itself. I'm not talking about that. But when backstitch overlays cross-stitch, then yes, the cross-stitch has to be done before you can lay the backstitch over top of it. But that doesn't mean you have to have the whole piece done. If you're doing a scene and there's backstitch scattered across the whole thing, if you're doing a house, for example, and the windows are backstitched, when you're done the part of the house that surrounds the window, then yes, you can go ahead and do the backstitch. The point is, you don't want to lay backstitches down and do cross stitch over top of it. The backstitch goes on top of the cross stitch. So I think that part of it is, now I'm just thinking here, that people get discouraged because they have this nice design done, the cross stitch is done, and now they're left with the backstitch. And I can see where that would really be discouraging. So possibly that's part of the reason some people don't like backstitch. So the next time you're working, or if you're working on something now that has backstitch, when you have an area of cross stitches complete, you can go ahead and do the backstitch on that area and then go do something else. Don't leave the backstitch to the very end. That would make me crazy, I think. Not only if you already don't like it and you leave it to the end, you're just creating a miserable situation for yourself. But backstitch, when it's used effectively in a design, really brings it to life. And so I can see where when you get an area done, go ahead and get the backstitch done. So it just really just makes it pop, Reward yourself instead of leaving it to the end. Anyway, I don't know what made me think of that today, but anyway, that's my 2 cents and then some about backstitch. Probably also confused with basket weave. Don't ask me why. Interesting. Well, over the next couple of weeks with all my traveling, we'll see how we do with creating episodes and getting them uploaded in any sort of a schedule. I'll do my best, and I know I'm going to be having a great time. I'm going to be surrounded by people who love needlework. What more can you ask? Let's see, great food, beautiful weather, mild temperatures, flowers, somebody making my bed every day, cleaning the bathroom. Lots of things to look forward to on a cruise. But the main thing is we're going to be doing a lot of stitching. So if that sounds good to you, start making plans now for 2025. Go ahead and start talking to somebody about being your roommate. And if you've got 3 or 4 friends that are interested, when you go to register, let us know that you're traveling with others. And we do our best to put you in cabins that are close to each other. No promises ever. But yeah, so go ahead and start making your plans now, because our cruises generally fill up pretty quickly. And I think that our 2025 choices are going to be really popular. Anyway, so between now and the next time we get together, stitch happy, stay safe, and I'll see you then.